Seeing a student loan debt crisis. Now, sure, some loans are being forgiven, but there are students that have way more debt than what we're seeing. And anyone that's banking on forgiveness is probably going to be sorely disappointed. A lot of students think, oh, well, let me get through the admissions thing, get into the college, and then I'll focus on scholarships. And the problem with that is
Right. That makes perfect sense. Now that I think about it, it makes perfect sense.
we've had another student where a committee reached out the following year and said, hey, we have some extra money. Do you need any more scholarships? And she was like, yeah. And they literally just gave her a scholarship. She didn't even have to apply.
The stress. I don't think people really realize, especially people who are taking on debt for the first time. I don't think people realize what it's like to owe someone else money. I'm in debt right now. I have student loans because I didn't realize what the scholarship system was.
But I'm here to say that doesn't have to be the way it is. And actually, if we can be strategic and if we can stack some strategies, if we can apply for scholarships and do some other things to avoid that student loan debt, then not only can we possibly even leave college with maybe even a nest egg if we're working a little bit, but we can actually focus on our degree, focus on maybe a business idea we have. We can focus on building our network. We can focus on getting a job that we love rather than one that pays the bill. We will just have way more opportunity and way less stress, and ultimately a much brighter future if we can avoid that student loan debt. So how can you do that?
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Neil Harder, aka the Farm Boy. You have joined me on Farm Boy Meets the World, aka FBMW. So today we are joined by Jocelyn Pearson, and as you can see by the little logo thing, she is with the scholarship system. She's a founder of the scholarship system, and the scholarship system, for those of you guys who don't know, the name is very apt because it is a system that is designed to help students acquire scholarships. It's so successful, as a matter of fact, that the last time I checked, I think you've earned over $13 million for all of your customers and all of the people who have joined the scholarship system. So you obviously know what you're doing. All of these people that are enrolling in the scholarship system are obviously enrolling in something that is viable and it works very well. And so that's why I really wanted to interview you today, because I'm curious. And I think a lot of people are curious, and I think that this is such a perfect opportunity for not only you to, reach more people, but for me to reach more people as well, and for the FBMW to reach more. And so, Jocelyn, the first question I want to ask you is, although I've kind of already touched on why it's important, I want to hear it in your own words. Why do you think that people ought to care about the scholarship system and what you and I are going to talk about today? Like, why should people watch this video that we're starting right now?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And, we are seeing a student loan debt crisis. Now, sure, some loans are being forgiven, but there are students that have way more debt than what we're seeing. And anyone that's banking on forgiveness is probably going to be sorely disappointed. I always say, please do not go in thinking that this is just going to disappear. But the thing is that when we talk to people, so we spoke a little bit earlier, I lived out of the country. Most people starting off their life don't have to dig themselves out of a hole to begin with. But in the United States, because of our education system, that's not the case. Instead, you're handed a mortgage as soon as you leave college, and you have to dig yourself out of that hole before you can really focus on putting away money for retirement or investing in assets that can build your wealth or starting a family or starting a business, whatever it is. And fortunately for myself and actually my husband, we did not have any student loan debt. And that has snowballed into so many opportunities that a lot of my friends still don't have now because they're trying to pay off on their student loans. So that said, I know everyone is doing it. So a lot of students, they see other students borrowing the money. That's just the way it is. But I'm here to say that doesn't have to be the way it is. And actually, if we can be strategic and if we can stack some strategies, if we can apply for scholarships and do some other things to avoid that student loan debt, then not only can we possibly even leave college with maybe even a nest egg if we're working a little bit, but we can actually focus on our degree, focus on maybe a business idea we have. We can focus on building our network. We can focus on getting a job that we love rather than one that pays the bill. We will just have way more opportunity and way less stress, and ultimately a much brighter future if we can avoid that student loan debt. So, how can you do that? For me, the biggest lever that students have in their armor against student debt is applying for scholarships. And the great news is it's not just 1 year. A lot of people think, "Oh, well, I missed senior year in high school, so I just scholarships are out of it for me." That's not the case. I applied all the way into my senior year in college. So the good news is that even if someone finds this and they're already there, or they have a younger sibling that's already there, it's never too late. It's also never too early. But I think the biggest thing to know is that you've got really 5 years that you can be doing this and just racking in more and more money.
You know, there was a couple of things that you said that just made me jump right away, and one of them was the stress. I don't think people really realize, especially people who are taking on debt for the first time. I don't think people realize what it's like to owe someone else money. It is stressful. I'm in debt right now. I have student loans because I didn't recognize or I didn't realize this what the scholarship system was until a little bit later, and then I'm starting to actually maybe get involved with it now and stuff like that. But and I'm only a rising third year. I have plenty of time. You know what I mean? I can. And my goal is to use the system and then basically pay off the rest of the debt that I have. I was fortunate and I did earn scholarships and stuff just on my own accord without even using the system at all. But I know for a fact that if I did use the system, it would be much easier to earn more. And that stress, like it eats away at you. It prevents you from doing some things. It's just a cloud. It really is this atmosphere of just like fear almost. Like and that's kind of what debt is designed to do, honestly. And so I think that that's a really important factor that you mentioned. And the other important thing that you mentioned, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. The other important thing that you mentioned is the fact that you can do this for 5 years, basically. You don't have to start when you're a senior in high school, and you don't necessarily have to start when you're a freshman in college. As a matter of fact, on your website, there's a man who has 3 daughters. One of them's a senior, one of them's a junior, and then I think one of them's a freshman in college. One of them's a senior in high school, one of them's a freshman in college, and one of them's about to graduate. And all three of them have done it, and all three of them are about to graduate debt free now. And so it's like that's a perfect case study. Like you can do this.
And I mean, also talking about the stress, look at the depression rates, our generation and the generations after us are some of the most depressed, stressed out generations that we are seeing. Well, why do we think that? Well, maybe because they're walking out buried in student loan debt. We don't even need to talk about the health insurance and all of that medical stuff. I mean, we're just at such a disadvantage right off the bat. And so if this is something that we can at least give ourselves a leg up on, why not? Right?
I totally agree. And so as you're going through the scholarship system like that, is it when people are first starting, I imagine it takes some time before you start to earn scholarships and things like that. So obviously it is advised that you start as soon as possible, really, right?
Yeah, you know what? If I could, I would say everyone should be doing this by junior year in high school. That would be ideal. We've even worked with school districts to put our books in the hands of their juniors, our course in the hands of their seniors, because the earlier, the better. And a lot of students think, oh, well, let me get through the admissions thing, get into the college, and then I'll focus on scholarships. And the problem with that is that we just missed out on tons of deadlines in our junior year and in the fall semester that naturally are actually less competitive because other students are waiting to apply. So now you're entering the application pool when everyone else is as well. So in the scholarship system, we've got just a lot of things that the analogy I use is turning the dial in our favor. So just one little tick, one little tick, one little tick, these little increments of strategies build up in our favor. One of those is applying earlier when less students apply so that naturally it's just less competitive. Now, that said, also when we get to college, we're kind of back in that boat where it's a little bit less competitive too, because a lot of students think the ship has sailed and they're not applying. And if you're doing awesome stuff in college, you're going to look amazing. So when we're talking to scholarship committees, who do they want to invest in? And think of a scholarship as an investment because that's what it is. They're giving money to a student that they want to support because they think the student will do something with their lives. So, how do we prove that? Well, through essays and our grades and all this stuff. But when you're in college and you're kicking butt, you have a decent GPA, you're getting involved, you're starting a podcast or a YouTube channel, you're proving to them, hey, I can not only come to college, but I'm doing something with it. They're going to think, okay, this is probably someone where if we give them the money, they're going to come back as an alumni. Maybe they'll donate for the next set of scholars one day. They're investing in the future. And so when you're in college and you're doing good stuff, it's actually a little bit easier to win the money because you can show them, hey, I'm here and I'm doing it. So there's different times in the cycle when it's a little bit easier.
I see. As I was listening right now, it kind of seemed like you're maybe implying that a lot of the scholarships are coming from the institutions themselves that students are attending, or is it just a wide range that people are earning?
No, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about banks, law offices, credit unions, uh, doctor's offices, grocery stores, any kind of organization that's giving money. So, of course, we have a whole lesson on merit money, which is from institutions. And that's what most people think of when they're getting scholarships. But that, for the most part, is when you apply to the college. You've got to apply and then you submit a scholarship application. The ones I'm talking about are called private scholarships or third party or outside scholarships. This is where we can get money from so many different places, different people, different organizations, different amounts, different years. There's a lot more flexibility out there, but still, yes, the institutions want you to come back and donate. Don't get me wrong. But I had a lot of the ones that I received, or most students receive, rely on donors in order to keep going. So any kind of scholarship has that mentality as well.
Right, right. And I think it's even for some students, a lot of students actually, there's even regional scholarships that aren't available to other people, and even like job specific scholarships and all sorts of different, like kind of like you say, like strategy, little strategic things that once you're aware of, it allows you to really elevate yourself in terms of chances of being selected, right?
Yeah, and that's so the scholarship system is broken down into 6 steps, and that is what one of the steps is all focused on is just who is giving scholarships and where do I find them? And we give a something called the Savvy Scholarship Locator where it has 36 different squares for students to brainstorm different places they could possibly get scholarships from. Maybe a parent's employer, maybe your own employer, but exactly, there's so many different places out there and a lot of students, they just want to go to say fastweb.com, put in their basic info and hope that the best list comes out. The thing is, so at the scholarship system, actually our deadline was yesterday. I just realized for our scholarship every year for 10 years now, we've given out money and we don't put our scholarship on those search engines because they charge a fee. So why am I going to pay $600 to list the scholarship? I'd rather just create another student that I can give it to. So a lot of the smaller scholarship organizations are not even on those search engines. And so this is where we have to get creative and start brainstorming. Hey, okay, well, who could possibly be giving out the money and can we find the scholarships through them so that we're finding the ones that are less competitive, that are actually legitimate, and I have a higher chance of winning, even if they're not on those sites like FastWeb.
Didn't even realize that, and you see, that's a little bit concerning because it's almost like there's a group of very generous people that are basically monopolizing the scholarships, right? And making it super duper different because that's when you monopolize it like that and no one realizes that there's anything else, everyone applies to those ones. And so just by nature, the competition is like amplified, right?
Precisely. So this is another example of turning that dial in your favor is finding ones that are not on those search engines is another tactic to reduce your competition.
Right, right. That makes perfect sense. Now that I think about it, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, so it actually that leads me to something else I was thinking about that I feel like I heard this when I was going through some of your portfolio and stuff, but there's a lot of scholarship money that just goes unclaimed, right?
Yeah, you would be you'd be amazed. Actually, there is one specifically that every year they reach out to us with the application and they say, "Hey, can you send this? We've only received a couple applications." Or some years they've said, "We haven't received any. Can you share this with your people?" And so those kind of emails we only share with our members so that we kind of keep that pool small. But we've won it like every year for the last probably 4 or 5 years. One of our students has won it because no one's applying. So we've even had a year for ours where we only got 7 applications and we were giving out 3 scholarships. So it was a 50-50 success rate if you just submitted an application. So I've seen it personally. I actually won one where there were 2 awards, 4 applicants. So they reached out to the donors and said, "Would you be willing to double your money?" And they gave it to all of us. So literally just by submitting an application, we all received a scholarship and a banquet. Like they did like a banquet dinner for it.
See, I had a similar experience actually with one scholarship that I was fortunate enough to earn. It was with a sorority, I think. It was with Alpha Phi. Yeah, it was with A Phi sorority. And this was when I was a senior in high school. I applied for it, and they basically it was something along those lines of like, you're basically you got it. Like, no, there's not a lot of people applying, and then they gave us a banquet, and I got $1,000, and it was great and everything like that. And you see, for me, I was fortunate enough to earn some other scholarships, and then I don't know, maybe I wasn't as proactive and I didn't have as much initiative as I do now, but I was like, okay, I got a scholarship, like we're good. I didn't go crazy. I wasn't applying to a bunch and stuff like that. And I had a few other scholarships, and so that it wasn't a big deal for me. But now that I think about it, it's like, why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? Like, why would you not do it?
Yeah. And we've had other students. So one of our areas that we talk about is networking actually. We've had another student where a committee reached out the following year and said, "Hey, we have some extra money. Do you need any more scholarships?" And she was like, "Yeah." And they literally just gave her a scholarship. She didn't even have to apply.
Wow, you see, yeah, that networking, it's Yosh and I. For some people actually on FBMW haven't even met Yosh, but if you guys haven't met Yosh, Yosh is my technical manager. He's in some other episodes and stuff like that if you haven't seen him. But yeah, Yosh and I, we've realized the value of networking a lot recently because I mean we've only just started, but Yash and I literally know like world famous authors and stuff like that that we can communicate with, and they've helped us so much, giving us advice, just kind of led us in the right directions in a few things. And then especially this guy in business, like he really helped us as far as kind of learning how to put together a business deal, stuff like that, you know. So networking is massive.
Yep. It's in scholarships too. Most students don't even think about it, but it can definitely come full circle.
So one thing that I'm interested in is now I'm looking I kind of have this interesting viewpoint where I remember looking into this like 2 years ago when you first started. And then this is kind of like I said, this is before I was even in college. This is before I owned a podcast. This is before I was doing all this stuff. And I thought about it. And then now looking back at it, you're extremely successful. It's going, the wheels are turning, it's we're going. But I'm wondering what it was like for you, because as far as I understand, these are methods that you discovered in your process of applying for scholarships that you then systematize, right? And so, what was that like taking something? Because you kind of in my understanding, you had to analyze your own thought process in order to kind of create the scholarship system. So, do you mind kind of telling me about how that was?
Yeah, so it's funny. When I was in college, everyone knew me as like the scholarship nerd. They would say if someone brought up scholarships, they'd look at me and they're like, "Oh no, don't get her started." So I was actually passionate about them from a very early age. And what happened was a lot of friends and family would ask me, "How did you do that? Because we need some money." And so I would I had a lot of practice to try to break it down. And I would say, "Well, do this first and that first." And then I started realizing I sounded like a broken record. So I kind of got in a routine of telling them what to do in that way, just through conversations. And then after college was when I decided to put that into a book. But so I have my green belt, my Lean Six Sigma certification, which is all about efficiency and operations. So I am actually a systems nerd, which is very rare for an entrepreneur. So I could be basically a CEO or a COO. Not many entrepreneurs want that COO role, I could do it. Our whole business is run on systems and playbooks. But that said, so for me, that's kind of how my mind thinks is I make frameworks. I break things down into steps. And so I took what I was saying to them and put it on cards, and I kind of brainstormed as a mind map. And what's funny is the way that I wrote the book, which is how everything started. And actually, now we're releasing the second edition. We're on our 10-year anniversary this year. So we're releasing the second edition of the book for a celebration. But the way that I did it was I used our writing method. This is literally the writing method that we teach in the scholarship system, is what I used to write the book. So I first mind mapped, okay, let me brain dump what I say to them. And then I put together all these little random stories and points and examples to each of those on just this paper. I actually found the mind map, and it has like a ring of wine on it because I was drinking a glass of wine while doing this. I have it somewhere. I need to frame it and put it up in the office. And so then once I got that mind map, then I just had to put it in an outline. And then I could knock out like 1,000 words a morning before I went to my corporate job. And that's how the book was written. So I really took those conversations with friends and family that gave me a lot of practice. I took my systems kind of mind, and then I used our 3-step writing method. And that's really what gave me that framework.
Yeah, I see that. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, that's really cool though. That you, like you mentioned, that you can have the dual role, CEO and CEO. Yeah. So, did you have any input from other people as you were going through this, going through actually systematizing everything?
Um, I would say I definitely reached out to other scholarship winners. I have like all the quotes in the book, the first version of the book came from fellow scholarship winners versus our own students, where now in the second edition, we've been able to pull them from parents and students alike that we've worked with. I mean, I could have tripled the book just by giving all of the testimonials that we've been able to pull from. But also we have a Facebook community that goes along with our course. And in there, a lot of parents, and mostly parents, are the ones that are driving behind the scholarship system, but they're having conversations. Hey, how did you guys do this? How did you do that? And so I was able to take pieces from that and put them inside the book to show people how they've taken strategies and maybe made them their own a little bit. And so that's what I love about this second edition, is just how personalized it is. But that said, the first edition of really starting off, I did speak to other scholarship winners. I also had a friend who had just released a book on how to release books, how to publish books. So as far as the book process, he helped me a ton. But as far as the scholarship process, I knew a lot of the other scholarship nerds at college and spoke to them for sure.
That makes sense. And I was looking in, or we did an interview actually with this guy named Don. He was he was a president of marketing for Tyson Incorporated. Yeah, that's what it was. He was the president of marketing for Tyson, and he had a few other roles. That's why I was getting a little trouble there. But yeah, and him and I, we spoke a lot about his marketing strategy and his sales strategy, and his reasoning behind why he's so good at marketing is because he originated in sales. He understands from the base level what people need and kind of how to translate that into, okay, how can we market this to you? And so it sounds, in some ways, it sounds like you, with the second edition, especially, you've really been able to get that feedback. And now it's like the community is there. The community is there and it's active and it's giving them feedback.
Well, and that's what's so beautiful about the course is we can regularly update it. Updating the book is a much bigger endeavor, where updating the course regularly, we can do that constantly based on that feedback or major changes. We all know this last year was a disaster with FAFSA. Well, we were staying on top of it, right? And making sure that our families had everything they needed so that they were prepared. So, yeah, it's definitely, we've been able to tailor the online course based on where we see people get hung up. Like, for example, a lot of students are not motivated. They don't have the drive to do this, right? So we say the number one reason that students don't get scholarships is They don't submit applications, right? And I know that sounds like a joke, but it's true. A lot of students want to do the process and they say they're going to, but they just never do it. And at first, I think they're getting overwhelmed with all the junk that's out there. But secondly, you said earlier, you were saying how you just don't understand the feeling of owing someone money until you owe that money. I think that students really don't understand the consequences of the student debt until it's too late. And so this is an example where we created the scholarship system and we saw parents just banging their heads against the wall saying, my student's not doing the work. And that is where we actually brought in a teen psychologist to talk about, okay, well, why? And so we came up with all these fun strategies to try and make it more actionable and more implementable, and really to make it align with students' values so that they understand it and prioritize it more. So lots of strategies like that, but that wasn't something until we got in it and we started seeing where were people getting hung up. Now we've been doing this for 10 years. We know where people get stuck now, right? So we've fine-tuned a lot of it. But I think the other thing is breaking it down into 6 steps, right? Instead of saying, "Oh, go apply for scholarships," students look at you and they're like, well, where do I even start? What do you mean go apply for scholarships? Do I write an essay first? Do I have to apply to this college? I don't know where to start. With the scholarship system, we say, just go do step 1. And then at the end, there's to-do items. All right, now you did step 1, now just go do step 2. And then as long as you're doing the to-do items, by the time you finish the course, you've got applications submitted, you have a list built, you have essays written, you have everything done. You don't need to think of what to do. You just have to do it.
This sounds exactly like what my football coach told me when I was first starting. I ended up becoming really good at football, but when I first started, I was terrible. I was extremely overwhelmed. I had no idea how to catch a football, how to run a football, none of that stuff. And he goes, you have to take care of the small thing, and then the big things will take care of themselves. And it sounds to me like that's a very, very transferable philosophy, and especially with the application system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just getting all these little pieces. So actually, we talk about a debt-free degree and how it's a puzzle. And every person's puzzle looks differently. The cuts of the pieces, the image on it, and you can choose which pieces of the puzzle to put together to get to that debt-free degree. It's the same thing. We're just breaking it down, this big picture of a debt-free degree, into little bite-sized pieces and stacking these strategies one by one, scholarships being one of the most important, the foundation, but stacking them to get to that end goal. But if we're just looking at that end goal, we're going to get overwhelmed and we're not going to make any progress. So we've got to just knock out one step at a time.
Right. I think one of the other things that I kind of skipped over it, but I want to go back to it for a second. I think it's just I don't even know what the word to describe it. It's just amazing that you guys hired a teen psychologist to address this issue. That's the type of thing that it's like you see Boeing, they're being sued right now because of how terrible their basically their business practices are. It's like why can't more businesses actually cater to the needs of the customers like you guys are doing? I really appreciate that. That's honestly that's so invaluable. And I think that's something that should definitely be reiterated to everyone that's watching this. Like this company cares about you guys. Like, come
Yeah.
on, you know what I mean?
And I think our members actually I know that they feel that. We have tons of emails where they're like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. This was such a personal response. I didn't expect this." And the community is huge. And there's a reason for that. It's because we've really cherished it, we've really nourished it. That for me, that has probably been more of a focus at this point than the actual strategies themselves, because I know that the most important thing, I know that the strategies work, but it's building that community and getting them to implement it. So we even do things like every single month we do a giveaway for people who celebrate their wins. And you might hear wins and you think, okay, it's for scholarship winners. No, it's for any win. And we tell this to our members. We say, if you printed out the workbooks and you made it through step 1, that's a win. One month we chose a winner. She finally figured out how to sync our course calendar with her personal calendar so she didn't miss any of the live events. And I know she hated tech. So I was so proud of her. She was our winner. So we talk about how any progress is a win for us, and we celebrate those as a community every single month. Now for years we've been doing this. So just little things like that are really fun. But you know, it's different when it's also this is my baby, right? It's a lot different than say Boeing, where of how many of those people actually have personal stake in the business at this point, right?
Right. So one of those things that's a little bit more intangible that I would be interested if you could speak on is if can you kind of describe what it's like actually winning a scholarship? You know, what does that feel like when you win a scholarship and you get to pay for college and even get paid to go to college in some instances, right? How does that feel?
Yeah, and so that's where I got to. I started off with only a $500 scholarship that I won. And for me, I got sucked into scams. So I actually spent an entire year applying to scholarships that just they were sweepstakes scholarships, they were drawings, they were just not worth anyone's time. This is again something that we talk about in the scholarship system, how we don't want to do the ones that are based on luck. Okay? So side note, if it is 15 minutes or less, it's not worth your time. Okay? Just a very quick rule of thumb. If you can knock it out while watching whatever show is big right now, Stranger Things, whatever. That's been a while, but if you can knock it out while watching your favorite TV show, it's not worth your time, okay? And you might hear that and think, "Oh man, that means that I have to do the ones that require more work." Yes, again, think of that dial. We want that because we can sell ourselves. It gives us an opportunity to increase our chances, okay? But that said, I didn't listen. I didn't even know this yet, right? And so I spent a whole year doing what I'm telling you guys not to do. And so I didn't hear back. So I was about to quit. So I know the other side of it too, where you're thinking, but I submitted all these applications and I never won a dollar. And I was so frustrated. And I was like, scholarships are scams. They're not really a thing. And then finally, I won $500. I found a little local scholarship as a junior that I could apply to, and I won it. And that for me was huge. It was a game changer because it just showed me, oh, okay, wait a minute. There is money out there. I'm just not applying to the right ones. And so that's kind of what started me tweaking my strategies and playing with, okay, what essay worked, what didn't, what ones are legit, what ones aren't, and really fine tuning that strategy. So that win, even though it was only $500, was huge for me. And I see this with so many families where they're like, first win 500 or first win 1,000 or first win 1,800. And I get so excited because it is the fire that lights them up. And after that, it gets addicting. So that for me kind of people I've done other interviews and they're like, "Man, that was really entrepreneurial of you to take this first win and keep going." And it is in entrepreneurship, it's those first few sales and they light you up and now you're just on this roll. And it was kind of like that. So once we get that first win, it validates us, okay, these are legitimate. I'm capable. And then as they start rolling in, it just gets addicting. It gets so exciting. And then to get to literally getting paid to go to college, I mean, it was my freshman year, I dropped my laptop and it broke. It was completely done, even though it was brand new. And I didn't have to freak out about it because I actually had excess funds that semester. I had them every semester. And so I was able to go and just get the new laptop. Little things like that, where I just didn't have the stress of other students because I had that extra money. Now, for me, I'm naturally a worker. I still would be I was a server, or I was an assistant, a teaching assistant, or whatever. So I always brought in some extra money still anyway, but I was able to put that money away. And because of that, within 2 months of graduating from college, I bought my first rental property. And then that snowballed into another property and another. So this is where, again, this applying for scholarships turned into so many other opportunities and really changed my future in more ways than one. But one of them is that having that buffer and having that freedom and lack of stress, I was able to put money away instead of just freaking out constantly about how to pay the bills. So, I mean, it feels amazing. There's really, if I was to put it down to one word, it's freedom. It feels freeing, is what it does.
I think honestly that that's the best way you could have described it. I mean, I am not in the boat myself yet. I do plan on being there soon. I definitely plan on following the system and stuff. And I think freedom is a really good way of describing it. it sounds very apt. So one it kind of you kind of started touching on something that led me into wants to lead me into the next question is, you know, I kind of, for me personally, I don't experience this, but I can see putting myself in other people's shoes how they might experience this. How do you tell someone who's maybe thinking of like opportunity costs, like what's the opportunity cost of applying for something that I may not get, as opposed to going and working and gaining guaranteed money? You know what I mean? Like, how do you make that argument?
So we had a student win $600 after a 45-minute effort of applying.
There you go. Period.
Period. You please tell me what student can make more, that's an hourly rate of over $600.
So,
I had a, and this is
no, sorry, go
not
ahead.
the only one. I was just going to say, I mean, any of our students that win, when you figure out that hourly rate, just think, even if we win a $500 scholarship, okay, if they're making $50 an hour, which they're not, right? You'd need 10 hours. $25 an hour, we need 20 hours. No scholarship will take you 20 hours. None. And 500 is like the minimum amount that you would win. So if we can take those 20 hours and put them into more applications, your payout is going to be insane. I always joke that actually my best paid time of my life was when I was in college. Like my hourly rate was just unbelievable because it really, and especially once again, this is why it's called a system. Once you get a well-oiled system in place, like in college, I would win almost every other one that I was applying to. So the amount of time going into them really was minimal. Once I got that essay that was just doing so well, I would just tweak it and reuse it. So then the effort was really minimal. So yeah, it's just, I understand. I did waste a whole year applying and not hearing back. So I get it.
Right,
Uh,
right.
but once you crack it, that's when the sky's the limit.
Right. And I think I remember looking through the your guys' website, and I think there was one gentleman. I think it may have actually been the same gentleman who has three daughters who are successful with the system. He goes, my daughter, when you do the math, is earning about $400 an hour. And he's like, I don't even earn $400 an hour. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, there you go, And I mean, Yash right here, he's one of my best friends, and we talk a lot about our different our business ventures and stuff and our plans. And this man is working at one of the very margin of the tech industry. He's a computer science engineer, and even he's not earning $400. Like, you know what I mean? Like this really is a super overlooked method. You know what I mean? I suppose that's the way you could say it.
Yeah. And then if you really want to get nitty gritty, let's talk about, if you were to borrow this instead, so when you win a scholarship, you're not just saving that amount, you're actually saving that amount plus interest. Because if you were to borrow it instead, you're going to have to pay interest on it. And it takes on average 21 years to pay back student loans. That's not how long it's supposed to take, but the average right now is 21 years. So by saving that $500, you're saving the 500 plus 21 years of interest. So there's also extra return on the investment in the back of it too.
I wish I just what are some of the difficulties that you're having with actually making people aware of this whole thing? Because it's like this is gold just waiting to be picked up on the side of the road. So are you finding difficulty with marketing, or can you speak to me on that?
It's funny. So when we first started, back then, online courses, webinars, this stuff was actually really, really new, really new. I'll never forget when we first launched, it was a sketchy PayPal button on just a WordPress page. These days, no one would buy that. Like it looked so sketchy, but back then that was advanced. Nowadays, it's so normal to purchase info and courses and ebooks and all of these things. So nowadays, it's a lot easier. Also, back in the day, no one was coaching people on how to get scholarships. SAT, ACT test prep, of course, but no one was really learning that you can improve your chances of getting money for college until we started. So we were really early in the game. Nowadays, there's so many people, and we found a company the other day charging, it was like $2,400 for one essay for helping. Crazy. Good for them. But that said, it is now very common to hire help to get into colleges, to review admissions essays, to help with scholarships, whatever it is. So it's a lot easier nowadays. Where we struggle is actually what we would love to do is get into school districts. We would love to get into bigger groups and help them reach the students that don't have parents that can afford this, or that don't have the knowledge of things of this even being an option. So that's something that we are actually looking into, is how do we get this into school districts or into communities at a larger scale. So really that's more where we're looking.
I'm really happy to hear you say that because that like literally ties very, very closely into what I was kind of talking about, what I want to offer you later on, but we can do that later. So, something that another thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of the reality that the more people that have joined the scholarship system, right? Essentially, the more competitive earning a scholarship will be because you have more people that are equipped with the tools to make themselves the best applicants, right? And so obviously this is kind of a turnover though, because it's like every 4 years, it's going to be basically a new batch, realistically. Like every 5 years, there's going to be a new batch of people that are coming on earning scholarships and stuff like that. So I was just kind of playing with that idea, but yeah, I mean, are you really even concerned about that? Really? About no, not at all. No.
There's so much money out there, and a lot of people are going for their specific area. So, and again, going back to the motivation thing, we can lead the horse to water. We can't make them drink. Unfortunately, a lot of students are actually not going to do it. So, I think everything always shakes out. And if we're raising the bar and everyone's submitting better quality applications, then that's great. But no, I'm not too concerned about that.
Okay. That's really good to hear that you're not concerned about that. And I'm not really concerned about that as much either. For a second there, I was thinking, maybe, but now that you mention it, I mean, if you really think about it, it's like there is literally unclaimed money out there, like you mentioned. So it probably is better that everyone is starting to understand how to access this.
Yeah, and I think, the rising costs of college are forcing people to now. I mean, it's been expensive for a long time, but now it is really unreachable for so many families where you can no longer just part-time job your way through college. It's just impossible. You will never earn enough to pay it. So, unless you have like a full salaried job. So, it's a good thing that people are looking for these strategies and implementing them. I love it. I think, and people always joke, "Oh, what if they make college free and you're out of a job?" Great. That would solve my passion. Like that is fine. I'm not afraid of that either. But if it was to come to fruition, fantastic. That would leave a lot of people in a much better situation.